Hello, everyone. My name is Ethan, and I will be your guide on this enchanting journey into the world of storytelling. I'm thrilled to be here with you as we embark on an epic adventure filled with magic, mystery, and courage. Our story, titled The Chronicles of Elendor, The Lost Kingdom, is a captivating fantasy adventure set in a realm where enchanted forests whisper ancient secrets, towering mountains hide forgotten truths, and mythical creatures guard the mysteries of old. Elandor, once a mighty kingdom known for its wisdom and power, now lies in ruins after the mysterious disappearance of its royal family. Chaos reigns, but hope is not lost. Let us introduce the characters in this journey. Lyra Nightshade, a brave warrior with a shadowy past, as she discovers an ancient artifact that could hold the key to Elendor's salvation. Alongside her are Erindor Silverleaf, the skilled elf archer, Thorn Ironfist, the honorable dwarf warrior, Selene Moondancer, the powerful sorceress. Together, they embark on a perilous quest to unravel the truth, restore balance to the land, and reclaim the glory of Elendor. As our heroes face treacherous landscapes, formidable foes, and dark forces, they will forge bonds of friendship, encounter betrayal, and discover the true meaning of courage. So, settle in and let your imagination take flight as we delve into the first chapter of the Chronicles of Elendor, The Lost Kingdom. The adventure begins now. In the quiet village of Brightwood, nestled at the edge of the Whispering Forest, a young warrior named Lyra Nightshade lives a simple life, unaware of the extraordinary destiny that awaits her. Raised by the village elder, Lyra knows little of her past, only that she was found as a baby at the foot of the ancient stone circle deep within the forest. As the chapter begins, Lyra experiences a vivid dream, one that feels more real than any she has ever had before. In the dream, she is standing in the heart of the Whispering Forest, surrounded by towering trees that seem to hum with ancient power. A voice calls out to her, urging her to seek the truth and reclaim her destiny. When she awakens, Lyra finds herself drawn to the forest, where she discovers an ancient artifact hidden beneath the roots of an ancient oak tree. This artifact, a small, intricately carved stone, glows with a faint blue light. As soon as Lyra touches it, she feels a surge of energy coursing through her, awakening a power she never knew she possessed. Confused and frightened, she returns to the village, only to find that strange things are beginning to happen. The village animals become restless, the winds howl with an unnatural fury, and the once clear skies darken with ominous clouds. Lyra seeks out the village elder, who reveals that the artifact she has found is the key to an ancient prophecy, one that foretells the return of the lost kingdom of Elendor. The elder tells Lyra of the kingdom's fall, the disappearance of the royal family, and the chaos that has plagued the land ever since. According to the prophecy, a chosen one would one day rise to restore balance to Elendor, and the discovery of the artifact signals that the time has come. As the chapter ends, Lyra realizes that she can no longer remain in the safety of her village. The weight of her destiny presses upon her, and she understands that her journey is just beginning. With the artifact in hand and the village elder's words echoing in her mind, she sets out into the unknown, determined to uncover the truth about Elendor and her own mysterious past. The road out of Brightwood was rough and seldom travelled, winding through the Whispering Forest's dense thickets and towering trees. As Lyra ventured deeper into the woods, she felt the presence of the ancient magic that coursed through the land. The artifact she carried pulsed with a soft blue light, as if responding to the energy around her, guiding her through the labyrinth of trees. With each step, Lyra's thoughts were a whirlwind. The village elder's words echoed in her mind. A chosen one to restore the lost kingdom of Elendor. Could it be true? How could a simple village girl like her be connected to such a grand destiny? But the artifact was undeniable proof, and the strange powers it awakened within her could not be ignored. As she walked, the forest began to change. The air grew thick with mist, and the once vibrant colors of the trees and foliage faded into muted shades of grey. The wind carried an eerie whisper, as if the forest itself was alive, speaking in a language only it understood. Lyra tightened her grip on her sword, a sense of unease creeping over her. Suddenly, she heard a rustling in the bushes to her left. Her heart raced as she instinctively reached for the hilt of her sword, ready to defend herself. Out of the undergrowth emerged a figure, a tall, slender man with pointed ears, dressed in the green and brown garb of the elven kind. His long silver hair cascaded down his back, and his eyes, a deep emerald green, locked onto hers with an intensity that made her breath catch in her throat. "Do not be alarmed," the elf spoke, his voice smooth and melodic. "I mean you no harm." Lyra hesitated, lowering her sword slightly, but not fully letting her guard down. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice steady despite the tension in her chest. "My name is Erindor Silverleaf," the elf replied, stepping closer. "I am a guardian of the Whispering Forest, and I have been watching you, Lyra Nightshade." "Watching me? Why?" Lyra demanded, suspicion creeping into her voice. Erindor smiled faintly. "Because you are the one foretold in the ancient prophecies. The one who carries the artifact that will restore the kingdom of Elendor." Lyra's eyes widened in surprise. "How do you know about the artifact?" "The magic of this forest is older than time itself," Erindor explained. "It speaks to those who know how to listen. The artifact you carry is bound to the very essence of Elendor. When you entered the forest, the balance of magic shifted, and the trees whispered of your arrival." Lyra looked down at the glowing stone in her hand, a mixture of awe and fear swirling within her. "If what you say is true, then what am I supposed to do?" Erindor's expression grew serious. "You must gather allies, those who will aid you in your quest to restore Elendor. The path ahead will be fraught with danger, and you cannot face it alone." As if on cue, the ground beneath their feet began to tremble. The mist thickened, and the whispering wind grew into a howling gale. Lyra and Erindor braced themselves as the earth shook violently, and from the shadows emerged a group of menacing creatures, dark, twisted beings with glowing red eyes and jagged claws. They moved with unnatural speed, surrounding Lyra and Erindor in a circle of malevolent intent. "Shadow spawn!" Erindor shouted, drawing his bow and notching an arrow in one fluid motion. "These creatures are drawn to the artifact's power. We must fight them off." Lyra's instincts kicked in as she drew her sword, ready to defend herself. The shadow spawn lunged at them, their claws slashing through the air with deadly precision. Lyra parried the first attack, her sword meeting the creature's claws with a clash of steel. Erindor's arrows flew through the air, striking the shadow spawn with unerring accuracy. But for every one that fell, two more took its place. The battle was fierce, the sounds of clashing weapons and snarling creatures filling the air. Lyra fought with all her strength, but the numbers of the shadow spawn seemed endless. She could feel herself growing tired, her movements slowing as the weight of the battle bore down on her. Just when it seemed that all hope was lost, a deep, resonant voice echoed through the forest. "Hold your ground!" Out of the mist charged a stout, muscular figure wielding a massive warhammer. With a mighty swing, he crushed the nearest shadow spawn, sending it flying into the trees. The new arrival fought with unmatched ferocity, each swing of his hammer felling multiple creatures at once. "Thorn Iron Fist, at your service!" the dwarf shouted over the din of battle, a grin spreading across his bearded face. With Thorn's help, the tide of the battle quickly turned. The shadow spawn, realizing they were outmatched, began to retreat back into the shadows, their red eyes fading into the darkness. Within moments, the forest was still once more, the only sounds being the laboured breaths of the three warriors. Lyra sheathed her sword, her heart still pounding from the adrenaline of the fight. "Thank you," she said, turning to Thorn. "You saved us." Thorn waved a hand dismissively. "No need to thank me, lass. Those shadow spawn have been a thorn in my side for too long. I was happy to smash a few." Erindor nodded in agreement. "Your timing was impeccable, Thorn, but how did you find us?" Thorn chuckled. "I have my ways. The winds of fate led me here, and it seems I arrived just in time." Lyra couldn't help but smile at the dwarf's confidence. "I'm Lyra, and this is Erindor. We're on a quest to restore the kingdom of Elendor." Thorn's expression grew serious. "Elendor, you say? Aye, I've heard the tales. A kingdom lost to time, and with it, a great treasure. If you're looking to restore it, you'll need more than just a sword and a bow." "We know," Erindor replied. "That's why we need allies, strong ones." Thorn nodded thoughtfully. "Well, you've got one in me. I've been searching for a purpose ever since my own kingdom fell. If helping you restore Elendor means putting a few more shadow spawn in the ground, then count me in." With Thorn now part of their group, Lyra felt a renewed sense of hope. The path ahead was still uncertain, but with allies like Erindor and Thorn by her side, she knew they stood a chance. As the three of them continued their journey through the whispering forest, the mist began to lift, and the sun's rays broke through the canopy, casting a warm glow on the path ahead. Lyra looked at the artifact in her hand, its blue light now pulsing with a steady rhythm. "Where to next?" Lyra asked, turning to Erindor. "We must head to the ancient city of Valoria," Erindor replied. "There, we will find Selene Moondancer, a sorceress with knowledge of the old magic. She may hold the key to unlocking the artifact's true power." With their next destination set, the trio set off, their footsteps echoing through the forest as they embarked on the next leg of their journey. Little did they know that the challenges they had faced so far were only the beginning, and that the true test of their strength, courage, and unity awaited them in the shadows of Valoria. The road to Valoria was long and treacherous, winding through mountains and valleys that had seen better days. The city, once a jewel of Elendor, now stood as a shadow of its former glory, its crumbling walls and deserted streets a testament to the kingdom's fall. Lyra, Erindor, and Thorn travelled in silence for much of the journey, each lost in their thoughts as they prepared for whatever awaited them in the ancient city. The closer they got to Valoria, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. The skies grew darker, the air thicker, and the landscape more barren. It was as if the very land itself had been tainted by the kingdom's downfall. Yet, amidst the desolation, there was a certain beauty, a reminder of what Valoria once was and what it could be again. As they reached the outskirts of the city, the trio paused to take in the sight before them. The walls of Valoria, though crumbling, still stood tall, a symbol of resilience against the passage of time. Beyond the walls, the spires of ancient temples and towers rose into the sky, their surfaces worn by the elements, but still imposing. The city was a labyrinth of history, and somewhere within its depths lay the sorceress Selene Moondancer. "We've made it," Lyra said, her voice tinged with both awe and sadness. "Aye, but the real challenge begins now," Thorn replied, his eyes scanning the city with a mixture of curiosity and caution. "This place has seen much bloodshed. The spirits of the fallen may not take kindly to intruders." Erindor nodded in agreement. "Valoria is a city of secrets. We must tread carefully if we are to find Selene and avoid awakening whatever dark forces may still linger here." With that, they entered the city, passing through the gates that had long since lost their grandeur. Inside, the streets were eerily silent, the only sound being the wind that whistled through the empty alleyways. The buildings, once magnificent structures of marble and stone, were now ruins overgrown with vines and moss. It was clear that Valoria had been abandoned for centuries. Yet there was a sense that they were not entirely alone. As they moved deeper into the city, Lyra couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Shadows seemed to dance at the edge of her vision, and every now and then she thought she heard faint whispers carried on the wind. But each time she turned to look, there was nothing there. Erindor and Thorn seemed to notice it too, their hands never straying far from their weapons. "The sooner we find Selene the better," Lyra said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The temple should be in the heart of the city," Erindor replied. "If Selene is still here, that's where she'll be." They pressed on, making their way through the maze of streets until they reached the city's central square. There, towering above them, was the Temple of the Moon, a once grand structure dedicated to the worship of the moon goddess. The temple's facade was adorned with intricate carvings depicting celestial scenes, though many of them had been worn away by time. The doors, heavy and imposing, were slightly ajar, as if waiting for them to enter. "This is it," Erindor said, his voice laced with reverence. "The Temple of the Moon, Selene's sanctuary." Lyra hesitated for a moment, feeling the weight of the moment. She was about to step into a place where ancient magic still thrived, where the past and present intertwined. Taking a deep breath, she pushed open the doors and led the way inside. The interior of the temple was dark, the only light coming from the faint glow of the artifact in Lyra's hand. The air was thick with the scent of incense, and the walls were lined with statues of the moon goddess in various poses, each one more lifelike than the last. At the far end of the temple, a single figure stood before an altar, her back to them. "Selena!" Lyra called out, her voice echoing through the chamber. The figure turned slowly, revealing a woman of striking beauty and power. Her silver hair flowed like liquid moonlight, and her eyes, a deep shade of violet, seemed to pierce through the darkness. She was draped in robes of midnight blue, adorned with silver embroidery that shimmered in the dim light. In her hand she held a staff topped with a crescent moon, glowing softly with an ethereal light. "Welcome, Lyra Nightshade," Zelena said, her voice as smooth as silk. "I have been expecting you." Lyra exchanged a glance with Erindor and Thorn before stepping forward. "You know who I am?" "I do," Selene replied, a knowing smile playing on her lips. "The winds of fate have whispered your name to me, and the stars have foretold your arrival. You seek to restore the kingdom of Elendor, do you not?" Lyra nodded. "Yes, but I don't know how. I was told you could help me unlock the artifact's true power." Zelena's gaze shifted to the glowing stone in Lyra's hand. "The artifact you carry is a piece of Elendor's heart, a fragment of the kingdom's soul. It is a powerful relic, but its true potential can only be unleashed by one who possesses the strength of will and purity of heart." Lyra swallowed hard, the weight of Selene's words sinking in. "What do I need to do?" "First, you must understand the nature of the artifact," Selene explained, stepping closer. "It is a conduit for the magic of Elendor, a link between the physical world and the realm of the gods. To unlock its full power, you must attune yourself to the ancient magic that flows through the land." "How do I do that?" Lyra asked, feeling a mixture of excitement and trepidation. Selena smiled. "By connecting with the essence of Elendor itself. The artifact responds to the will of its bearer, but it also draws strength from the land. You must journey to the 4 sacred sites of Elendor, each one representing a different element, and perform the ritual of attunement. Only then will you be able to harness the full power of the artifact." "And where are these sacred sites?" Erindor asked, his tone curious. "They are hidden across the kingdom," Selene replied. "Each one guarded by powerful beings who will test your resolve. The first site is the Crystal Cavern, located in the heart of the Whispering Mountains. There you will attune yourself to the element of earth. Lyra nodded, determination shining in her eyes. We'll go there first then. Be warned, Celine said, her expression serious. The path ahead will not be easy. The guardians of the sacred sites are formidable, and they will not grant you their power without a fight. But if you succeed, you will gain the strength needed to restore Elendor. We're ready, Thorn said, his voice filled with confidence. No guardian is too tough for us. Selena's gaze softened as she looked at Lyra. You carry a great burden, Lyra. But know this, you are not alone. The spirits of Elendor watch over you, and the power of the artifact will guide you. Trust in yourself, and you will succeed. With Celine's words echoing in their minds, Lyra, Elendor and Thorn left the temple, their next destination clear. The crystal cavern awaited them, and with it, the first step towards unlocking the true power of the artifact. As they made their way out of Valoria, the sense of unease that had plagued them earlier began to fade. The sky, once dark and foreboding, now showed glimpses of blue through the clouds. It was as if the city itself was acknowledging their resolve, offering a small glimmer of hope amidst the ruins. We're getting closer, Lyra said, her voice filled with a newfound determination. I can feel it. Aye, Thorn agreed, a grin spreading across his face. And I can't wait to see what these guardians have in store for us. Elendor, ever the cautious one, nodded thoughtfully. We must remain vigilant. The guardians will not be easily defeated, and there may be other dangers lurking in the shadows. But despite his warning, Lyra felt a sense of confidence growing within her. She had come this far, and she knew that with the help of her companions, she could overcome any challenge that lay ahead. The road to the crystal cavern was long, but it was a journey she was ready to undertake. As the trio left Valoria behind, the city's ancient walls seemed to stand a little taller, as if remembering the days of old when Elendor was a thriving kingdom. The road ahead was uncertain, but Lyra knew that each step brought her closer to fulfilling her destiny. And with the artifact in her hand, glowing brighter than ever, she was ready to face whatever the future held. The journey to the Whispering Mountains was arduous, taking Lyra, Elendor, and Thorn through dense forests, across raging rivers, and up steep, winding paths. The mountains loomed ahead like a jagged wall, separating them from their destiny. Towering peaks touched the sky, their snow-capped summits piercing the clouds, while deep valleys and shadowy ravines hinted at the dangers that awaited them. As they travelled, the air grew colder and thinner, the landscape becoming more rugged with each passing day. The trees thinned out, replaced by rocky terrain and sparse vegetation. Yet the beauty of the mountains was undeniable. The sun cast long shadows across the crags, and the wind whispered through the rocks, creating an eerie yet melodic sound that gave the range its name. "We're getting close," Elendor said, as they approached a narrow pass that led deeper into the mountains. "The crystal cavern lies somewhere within these peaks. We need to find the entrance." Lyra nodded, her breath visible in the cold air. "We'll need to be careful. The guardian of the cavern won't be easy to defeat." Thorn grinned, his breathless excitement visible despite the cold. "I've been looking forward to a real challenge. Let's see what this guardian is made of." The trio pressed on, moving through the narrow pass and into the heart of the mountains. The path was treacherous, lined with loose rocks that threatened to give way underfoot. The wind howled around them, carrying with it the distant echoes of ancient voices. It was as if the mountains themselves were alive, watching their every move. As they ventured deeper, the terrain became even more unforgiving. Jagged cliffs rose on either side, and the path narrowed until they were forced to walk single file. The wind grew stronger, whipping around them with a cold bite that cut through their cloaks. Despite the harsh conditions, Lyra felt a strange sense of calm. She could feel the artifact's power resonating with the land, guiding her towards their destination. "Do you hear that?" Erindor suddenly asked, his voice barely audible over the wind. Lyra strained her ears, and sure enough, she could hear it. A faint, rhythmic sound that seemed to be coming from deep within the mountains. It was unlike anything she had heard before, a deep, resonant hum that seemed to vibrate through the very ground beneath their feet. "It's the heart of the mountains," Erindor said, his voice filled with reverence. "The source of the earth's power. We're close to the cavern." They continued onward, following the sound as it grew louder and more distinct. The path began to slope downward, leading them into a narrow gorge that cut through the mountains. The walls of the gorge were steep and covered in patches of ice, and the ground was slick with frost. Yet, the trio pressed on, their determination driving them forward. At the end of the gorge, they found themselves standing before a massive stone door, carved directly into the mountainside. The door was covered in ancient runes, glowing faintly with a soft green light. The humming sound was now so loud that it reverberated through their bodies, filling them with a sense of awe and trepidation. "This is it," Lyra said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The entrance to the crystal cavern." Erindor stepped forward, studying the runes closely. "These are wards, meant to keep out intruders. The Guardian must be beyond this door." Thorn drew his sword, the blade gleaming in the dim light. "Well, what are we waiting for? Let's go meet this Guardian." But before they could move, the ground beneath their feet began to tremble. The humming grew louder, the runes on the door flaring with bright light. The stone door slowly began to open, revealing a dark tunnel that led deep into the mountain. "Stay alert," Erindor warned as they stepped into the tunnel. "We don't know what we'll find inside." The tunnel was narrow and dark, the walls lined with jagged crystals that glowed with an inner light. The deeper they went, the more the crystals multiplied, their light growing brighter until the tunnel was filled with a kaleidoscope of colors. The air was thick with magic, the very essence of the earth itself. After what felt like hours, the tunnel opened up into a vast cavern, the ceiling so high it was lost in shadows. The walls of the cavern were covered in massive crystals, each one glowing with a different color. At the center of the cavern stood a large stone altar, and on it lay a single crystal, glowing with a brilliant green light. "The heart of the mountain," Erindor breathed, his eyes wide with wonder. "This is the source of the earth's power." But before they could approach the altar, the ground shook violently, and a deep rumbling voice echoed through the cavern. "Who dares to enter my domain?" The voice was so powerful that it seemed to shake the very foundations of the mountain. The crystals on the walls pulsed with light, and from the shadows emerged a massive figure. The Guardian was a creature of stone and crystal, towering over them with a body made entirely of the earth itself. Its eyes glowed with an inner fire, and its voice was the very voice of the mountain. "I am Gaian, Guardian of the Earth," the creature rumbled. "Why have you come to this sacred place?" Lyra stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest. "We seek to attune ourselves to the power of the earth and unlock the true potential of the artifact." Gaian studied them for a moment, its eyes narrowing. "The power of the earth is not given lightly. You must prove yourselves worthy by facing the trials of the mountain." Thorn grinned, tightening his grip on his sword. "Bring it on." Gaian raised a massive hand, and the ground beneath them began to shift. The floor of the cavern split open, revealing a deep chasm that stretched across the room. On the other side of the chasm, another tunnel led deeper into the mountain. "The first trial is one of strength," Gaian said. "Cross the chasm if you can." Without hesitation, Thorn leaped across the chasm, landing safely on the other side. Erindor followed, using his agility to navigate the narrow ledges and avoid the crumbling rocks. Lyra hesitated for a moment, then took a deep breath and jumped. For a moment she felt as though she was suspended in mid-air, the chasm yawning beneath her. But then she landed safely beside her companions. Gaian nodded approvingly. You have passed the first trial, but the next will test your resolve. The trio followed Gaian through the tunnel, which led them to another chamber. This one was filled with massive boulders, each one perched precariously on the edge of a cliff. A narrow path wound its way through the chamber, leading to another door on the far side. The second trial is one of endurance, Gaian said. Navigate the path and avoid the falling boulders. The ground shook as the boulders began to roll down the cliffs, crashing into the path with tremendous force. Thorn led the way, his reflexes allowing him to dodge the boulders with ease. Erindor followed, using his agility to weave through the obstacles. Lyra struggled to keep up, the weight of the artifact slowing her down. But she refused to give up, pushing herself to keep moving. Finally, they reached the other side, breathing heavily but unharmed. Gaian nodded again, his expression unreadable. You have passed the second trial, but the final trial will test your heart. The final chamber was unlike any they had seen before. The walls were made entirely of crystal, reflecting their images back at them from every angle. At the center of the room was a pedestal, on which sat a small glowing crystal. The third trial is one of will, Gaian said. Take the crystal, if you can. Lyra stepped forward, reaching out to take the crystal. But as soon as her hand touched it, the room began to spin. The crystals on the walls pulsed with light, and suddenly Lyra was no longer in the chamber. She was back in Valoria, standing before the Temple of the Moon. But something was wrong. The city was in flames, the sky dark with smoke. The temple was crumbling, and before her stood a figure she recognized all too well. Her father, King Eldric Nightshade. Lyra, he said, his voice filled with sorrow. Why did you leave us? Lyra's heart clenched with guilt and fear. I had to, father. I had to find a way to save the kingdom. But you failed, her father said, his image flickering like a dying flame. The kingdom is lost, and it is all your fault. Tears welled up in Lyra's eyes. No, I won't accept that. I can still save Elendor. I won't let the kingdom fall. The image of her father faded, and the scene shifted. Now she was in the Whispering Mountains, standing before the heart of the mountain. But instead of the green crystal, the heart was cracked and broken, its light dimming. The power of the earth is slipping away. A voice echoed in her mind. The kingdom cannot be saved. No, Lyra shouted, her voice filled with determination. I won't let that happen. I will save Elendor, no matter what it takes. The room stopped spinning, and Lyra found herself back in the crystal chamber, the glowing crystal still in her hand. She looked up to see Gaian standing before her, his expression unreadable. You have passed the final trial, he said, his voice filled with a strange mix of pride and sadness. You have proven your strength, endurance and will. The power of the earth is now yours. The crystals in the chamber began to glow with a brilliant light, their colors merging into a single radiant beam that shot up through the ceiling and out into the sky. The ground trembled, and for a moment it felt as though the entire mountain was coming to life. Lyra felt the power of the earth surge through her, filling her with a strength she had never known. The artifact in her hand pulsed with energy, and she knew that they had succeeded. They had unlocked the true potential of the artifact. Gaian stepped forward, his massive form towering over them. You have done well, but your journey is not yet over. The artifact's power will help you, but the true test lies ahead. The fate of Elendor is still in your hands. Lyra nodded, her resolve stronger than ever. We won't fail. With that, Gaian stepped aside, allowing them to pass. The trio left the cavern, the light of the crystal still shining brightly behind them. They knew that their journey was far from over, but they were ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. As they emerged from the mountains, the sun was just beginning to rise, casting a warm glow over the land. The whispering mountains stood tall behind them, their peaks touched with gold by the morning light. The wind whispered through the rocks, carrying with it the echoes of ancient voices, a reminder of the power they had unlocked and the challenges that still awaited them. But for now, they had a moment of peace, a moment to reflect on all they had accomplished. The artifact glowed in Lyra's hand, a symbol of their strength and determination. The fate of Elendor was still uncertain, but they were ready to face whatever lay ahead. And so, with renewed resolve, they set off towards their next destination, the shadow of the Whispering Mountains fading behind them as they continued their journey to save their kingdom. The journey to the City of Shadows was one filled with foreboding. The landscape changed as they travelled south, the lush forests and rolling hills giving way to barren plains and twisted, gnarled trees. The air grew colder, and the sky was perpetually overcast, as though the sun itself dared not shine on this cursed land. Lyra, Erindor and Thorn moved cautiously, aware that they were entering enemy territory. The City of Shadows was a place of dark magic, a stronghold of the Shadow Lords who sought to plunge Elendor into eternal darkness. It was a city of nightmares, where the very air was thick with fear and despair. "We need to be careful," Erindor warned, as they approached the outskirts of the city. "The Shadow Lords will be expecting us. We can't afford to be caught off guard." Lyra nodded, her grip tightening on the artifact. "We'll need to find a way into the city without being seen. Once we're inside, we can use the artifact to find the Shadow Crystal and destroy it." Thorn grinned, his eyes gleaming with excitement. "Sounds like a plan. Let's show these Shadow Lords what we're made of." The trio moved stealthily through the twisted landscape, avoiding the patrols of shadowy figures that roamed the outskirts of the city. The City of Shadows loomed ahead, its black stone walls towering above them, casting long shadows across the barren land. The city was a fortress, its gates guarded by fearsome creatures of darkness, their eyes glowing with malevolent light. As they approached the walls, Lyra felt a chill run down her spine. The city was alive with dark magic, the very air pulsing with it. She could feel the power of the Shadow Crystal deep within the city, its presence a dark blot on the fabric of reality. "We'll need to find a way over the walls," Erindor whispered, his eyes scanning the perimeter. "There's no way we can fight our way through the front gate." Lyra nodded, her mind racing. "There's a weak point in the wall over there," she said, pointing to a section where the stone looked old and crumbling. "We can use the artifact to break through." Thorn raised an eyebrow, impressed. "Good eye. Let's do it." They made their way to the weak point in the wall, moving silently through the shadows. Lyra held the artifact out, concentrating on the power within it. The artifact began to glow, and with a soft hum, the stones in the wall began to shift and crumble, creating an opening just large enough for them to slip through. Once inside the city, they found themselves in a narrow alley, the walls towering above them like the blackened bones of a long-dead giant. The city was a maze of dark, twisting streets, lined with buildings that seemed to lean in on themselves, their windows like empty eyes watching them. The air was thick with the stench of decay, and the only sound was the distant echo of footsteps on stone. "We need to find the central tower," Erindor said, his voice low. "That's where the Shadow Crystal will be. But we'll need to be careful. This city is full of traps and illusions." They moved cautiously through the streets, sticking to the shadows and avoiding the patrols of shadowy figures that roamed the city. The buildings loomed above them, their windows dark and foreboding. The streets were narrow and winding, and it was easy to lose their way in the maze of alleyways and dead ends. As they moved deeper into the city, the sense of foreboding grew stronger. The air was thick with dark magic, and the shadows seemed to move of their own accord, reaching out towards them with grasping fingers. The very ground beneath their feet felt wrong, as though they were walking on the surface of a nightmare. But Lyra kept her focus on the artifact, using its power to guide them towards their destination. She could feel the presence of the shadow crystal growing stronger, pulling them towards the heart of the city. Finally, they reached the central square, where the Tower of the Shadow Lords loomed above them. The tower was a massive structure of black stone, its walls lined with twisted gargoyles and dark runes that pulsed with a sickly green light. The air around the tower was thick with dark magic, and Lyra could feel the weight of it pressing down on her like a physical force. "We're here," Erindor said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The shadow crystal is inside that tower. We need to find a way in." Thorn nodded, his expression grim. "This is it. We're in the belly of the beast now." The entrance to the tower was guarded by two massive stone statues, their eyes glowing with a malevolent light. The statues were enchanted, their stone limbs capable of crushing intruders with ease. But Lyra was undeterred. She held the artifact out, focusing its power on the statues. The artifact glowed brightly, and the statues began to shake. With a loud crack, the stone crumbled, and the statues fell apart, their pieces tumbling to the ground. "Let's go," Lyra said, her voice steady. They entered the tower, the darkness closing in around them like a shroud. The inside of the tower was even more foreboding than the city outside. The walls were lined with dark tapestries that depicted scenes of death and despair, and the air was thick with the stench of decay. The only light came from the flickering torches that lined the walls, casting long, dancing shadows. They made their way up the winding staircase, the steps creaking underfoot. The tower was eerily silent, the only sound the echo of their footsteps. But Lyra could feel the presence of the shadow crystal growing stronger with each step, its dark power pulling them closer. Finally, they reached the top of the tower, where a massive door stood before them. The door was covered in dark runes, glowing faintly with a sickly green light. Lyra could feel the dark magic emanating from the door, a barrier meant to keep out intruders. But she wasn't going to let that stop her. She held the artifact out, focusing its power on the door. The runes flared brightly, and with a loud crack, the door shattered, revealing a dark chamber beyond. Inside the chamber, the shadow crystal hovered in the air, its dark light pulsing with a malevolent energy. The crystal was massive, its surface covered in jagged, black spikes that seemed to absorb the light around them. The air was thick with dark magic, and the very ground beneath their feet seemed to tremble with the power of the crystal. "This is it," Erindor said, his voice tense. "We need to destroy the crystal." But before they could move, a dark figure emerged from the shadows. The Shadow Lord was a tall, gaunt figure, his eyes glowing with a sickly green light. His body was covered in dark robes that billowed around him like smoke, and his voice was like the hiss of a serpent. "Use!" the Shadow Lord sneered, his voice dripping with malice. "You think you can destroy the power of the shadows? You are nothing compared to me." Lyra stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest. "We will stop you. We will destroy the crystal and free Elendor from your darkness." The Shadow Lord laughed, a cold, mirthless sound. "You can try, but you will fail. The power of the shadows is eternal." With a wave of his hand, the Shadow Lord summoned a wave of dark energy that rushed towards them. Lyra held up the artifact, its light flaring brightly as it absorbed the dark energy, protecting them from the attack. Erindor and Thorn sprang into action, their weapons at the ready. They attacked the Shadow Lord, but he was quick, his movements like a shadow as he dodged their blows. He retaliated with dark magic, sending bolts of energy that crackled through the air. Lyra focused on the artifact, using its power to shield them from the Shadow Lord's attacks. She could feel the energy of the crystal growing stronger, feeding off the battle. They needed to end this, and fast. Focus on the crystal, Lyra shouted. We need to destroy it. Erindor and Thorn nodded, turning their attention to the crystal. They attacked it with everything they had, their weapons striking the crystal with powerful blows. But the crystal was strong, its dark magic protecting it from their attacks. Lyra held the artifact out, focusing all of its power on the crystal. The artifact glowed brightly, its light piercing through the darkness. The crystal shuddered, cracks appearing on its surface as the light of the artifact began to weaken its dark magic. The Shadow Lord let out a roar of anger, his form flickering like a shadow. No! You cannot destroy the power of the shadows. But it was too late. The artifact's light grew brighter, and with a final burst of energy, the crystal shattered, its dark magic dissipating into the air. The Shadow Lord let out a scream of rage as his form began to dissolve, the power of the shadows fading away. With a final furious glare, he vanished, leaving only silence in his wake. The chamber was suddenly still, the dark magic gone. The air felt lighter, and the oppressive weight of the shadows was lifted. The artifact in Lyra's hand dimmed, its power spent, but she knew they had succeeded. We did it, Erindor said, his voice filled with relief. Lyra nodded, her heart still pounding. Elandor is free. They left the tower, the sun shining brightly as they emerged into the city. The City of Shadows was no more, its dark magic gone, and the land around it was beginning to heal. The shadows were receding, and the sky was clearing, the sun's light banishing the darkness that had plagued the land for so long. As they stood on the steps of the tower, looking out over the land, Lyra felt a sense of peace wash over her. The artifact was quiet in her hand, its power spent, but it had fulfilled its purpose. The shadows were gone, and Elandor was safe. But for now, they could rest, knowing that they had won a great victory. And as the sun set over the horizon, casting a warm glow over the land, Lyra, Erindor, and Thorn knew that they would face whatever came next, with strength, courage, and the unbreakable bond of friendship that had carried them through the darkest of times. Hi! I hope you've enjoyed my narration. Remember, all the characters in this story are purely fictional. I'll be back soon with another exciting story. Until then, I'm Ethan, your story narrator, signing off.